So the Gig Harbor market, real estate market, is going to surprise a lot of people going into 2026. I mean, after all, let's look at the second half of 2025. Prices cooled off. They maybe even went down 1% or 2%. Interest rates didn't come down as people thought they would. Time on the market definitely increased. But that is not what it's going to be exactly like going into 2026. And you may be surprised at what happens. It is not going to become a buyer's market. Now, it's going to be a split market. There are things that are going to sit for a little while and take a little while to sell, and other things are going to fly off the shelf. And that's why I'm here to break down this video. Is we're going to talk about what exactly happened in 2025. We're also going to talk about what all the experts are predicting for 2026. And we're going to talk about what buyers and sellers need to do to position themselves to take advantage of the situation. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Darren Rivers. I am the Northwest Realtor, and I am the managing broker of the Rivers Group. In today's video, we're going to go through all of these numbers, the history of how we got here, and then what to look for in 2026. Let's go back a few years ago and see how we ended up in this position in the first place. So if you remember during the COVID days, 2020, 2021, 22, things like that, the market was on fire. Interest rates were at an all-time low, sometimes less than 3%. It's virtually free money. Therefore, people were able to afford a lot more expensive home because all they do is they look at their mortgage payment, and with the interest rates so low, their mortgage payments were way lower because they were paying off principal versus paying off all of these high mortgage rates. And how the market just grew and grew and grew is somebody would put their home on the market. Let's just make up a number, $500,000. And there would be 15 offers that would come in, and those prices would escalate, and the house would end up selling for, say, $550,000. Well, then 3 weeks later, somebody down the street would list their market, and their new low benchmark is now $550,000. And then they would have multiple offers, and that price would escalate to, say, $600,000. Now, the low benchmark is $600,000. And the next house goes on the market starting at $600 and create a bidding war, and it goes up from there. So it was just a cycle where homes were going up 20% in value over a year, which just isn't sustainable. So then what did the feds do to slow all of this down? They started raising interest rates, and interest rates doubled in a year. I mean, it was like the fastest rise in interest rates in history. And yes, it worked. It definitely slowed the market down, but man, it handcuffed a lot of people. So many people are stuck in homes at this 3% or less interest rate, and they can't afford to move and get rid of that 3% interest rate and now go into, a 6.5 or whatever it may be. I mean, it's doubled their interest rate. So it really did slow the housing market down. So it worked. In my opinion, the feds did it way too aggressively, and it slowed down things too much, and we kind of got stuck. So now we fast forward to 2025, last year. Well, a number of years have gone by, and guess what? People's lives still evolve and change. Things happen. People expand their families. People downsize. People relocate for job reasons, or whatever it may be. Life circumstances happen, and people need to make a change. So homes are still being bought and sold. Yes, it's slowed down a little bit over those couple years for sure, but because life still goes on for everybody in the United States, people still move. So in 2025, did the market crash? No, not even close. Did it flatten out? Absolutely. Definitely in the second half of 2025, the market did flat. Buyers become much more selective because they are getting out of that 3% interest rate. They are purposely choosing to go into a higher interest rate. So they're being super selective on making sure that they are picking the right house. I mean, it has to be perfect for them to make that change. Sellers also realize that they just couldn't put any price tag on their house and get multiple offers. They realize that the market definitely cooled down, especially since the bidding wars of the COVID days. And so pricing has been very strategic, and you have to price it right. And believe it or not, there's still bidding wars. If a home is super, super desirable and they do it just right and they price it just right, they still get multiple offers, not 10 or 12, maybe 2 or 3, but the price does still escalate. And if they miss the price and they price it too high, it sits, it becomes stagnant, it's a stale listing, and they end up losing value. Let's take a look at these two graphs right now. now. First one is going to be the average price point, and this is for the downtown Gig Harbor area, okay? So it shows right now the average price point is over $1 million. You can see that last year, it was right about the same, and then it declined a little bit in the second half of 2025, and right back to where we were a year ago in January of 2026. So it's really become a flat market for sure, as far as not a whole lot of fluctuation, of course, and realize these are sales per month. So you have one big sale or one deader month, if you will. You know, the graph is kind of volatile, but all in all, we haven't really moved much in the last year. We also have to look at what is called a buyer's market versus a seller market and a balanced market. So statistically speaking, a balanced market is when you have 4 to 6 months of inventory of home, meaning that if no homes are listed from this day going forward, we will run out of inventory between 4 and 6 months. That is a balanced market. If it is above 6 months, it's a buyer's market. If it's below 4 months, it's a seller's market. In between is kind of balanced. Well, you can see from this graph right here, we only have 2.6 months worth of inventory. So technically speaking, we're still in a seller's market because there is not the inventory for the demand that we have. Realize when people are looking on the internet, and where else are they going to go? Of course, they're going to go to the internet. They're going to go to Zillow. They're going to go to Redfin. They're going to go to things like that. And you realize that you get information from all over the place that's totally different. For example, last year, Redfin said that the market decreased 3.9%, but Zillow says it increased 1.1%. So we're talking a 5% variance between those two different sites. Well, which one is right? The only way to really know is to get a local expert in your specific area where you're specifically looking. That's where you need to go, because there's micro markets within the global market, of course, all over the place. Gig Harbor is different than Kitsap County. Gig Harbor itself is different than the rest of Pierce County. So you really need to talk to a local expert. Feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to be a resource and just give you accurate information and statistics for our area. So what is a takeaway from this? And we're going to put up this graph right here showing homes sold in 2025. And this is just for the 98335 zip code, which includes downtown Gig Harbor and Gig Harbor South. So in the summertime, you know, which more homes sell in the summer, statistically, we're having 42, 43 homes sell a month in the summer. And then it declines in the fall. We only had 26 in November, but then it was back up to 30 in December of 2025. So as you can see, homes are still moving. It cooled, but they're still moving. Now, something that did change in 2025 statistically, or at least on average, is the time on market. So we're going to put up this graph right now. It shows in 98335, again, the main downtown area zip code of Gig Harbor. Average time on the market this summer in July was only 11 days, and that rose up to currently it's 67 days. But there is exceptions to all of those rules. That is not a hard rule. It again depends where the house is positioned and marketed and priced appropriately. And here's a great example. Right here is one of my listings that I just put on the market last month. This is 1710 112th Street Court Northwest in Gig Harbor, okay? We put her on the market, and on day number 1, we got a full price offer, went under contract, and now that deal fell apart. We went back on the market for, again, only one more day, and again, got a full price offer. Now we're through the inspection pending. It's actually going to close next week. So depending how you position the house and how it is priced and marketed and presented and all that stuff, houses still fly off the shelf if they're positioned correctly. So if you are a buyer and you see something you love, you got to realize that other buyers may love it too. Bidding wars still happen, not every day, but they do. And you got to be able to pounce on it if you really love it, because like I said, if you love it, likelihood is somebody else loves it too, and you're going to be competing. If there's a house that is wishy-washy, seems too high, stale on the market, well, then you have some negotiating power. So where are we? Are we at a time where buyers can take their time and be selective? Well, somewhat, yes. Time on the market obviously is higher. You know, the market seems to have flattened out. But again, just like the property that I gave the example of, sometimes they fly off the shelf. So you got to be ready to go. You remember how a little bit ago I mentioned how Gig Harbor is its own little micro market? And that's true all over the country. You know, different cities, different suburbs, different areas are their own micro market. And while we may follow national trends here and there, there's always variations. And Gig Harbor is definitely a unique spot, specifically when it comes to how we're positioned in Pierce County. So the average price point in all of Pierce County is $581,000. That is the average throughout the county. But in Gig Harbor, our average is about $1 million. So we are in a much different environment and a much different micro market within the greater market, and it really affects how things play out. So here in Gig Harbor, we are definitely a premium sub-market of the greater market, and the national headlines don't necessarily apply to us specifically. They may give you a greater picture, but they don't tell you what's going on in the streets here in Gig Harbor. Okay, so let's get into what people really are concerned about. And it definitely does affect the housing market, and it definitely affects your pocketbook and your budget, and that's interest rates. Now, I am not a lender, okay? So I rely on my lending partners. I rely on a lot of the research that is out there in the publications and things like that. But I will tell you what happened in 2025 and what's supposed to happen in 2026. So a year ago, interest rates were in the high sixes, almost 7%. And over the last year, right now, they're barely above 6%. They have dropped almost a percentage point over that year. The predictions for interest rates going into 2026 and into the spring of 2026 are they're going to slowly drop. Are we going to have a 1% drop again over 2026? No, I don't think so. But are we going to drop a 0.25%, maybe a 0.5%? That's very possible. Everybody is thinking that we are going to get into the fives, the upper fives. And if the number starts with a 5, it's going to be a win for the housing market and things are going to really accelerate. So the market has wrapped its head around that interest rates are never going to be 3%, and 5% or anywhere in the 5% range is going to be a win. So as long as it's below 6, you can expect the housing market to go up. So my next prediction for 2026 talks about inventory. And if we're going to have a rise in inventory and become more of a balanced market, I just don't see that coming. And here's why. Remember the interest rates that we talked about back a few years ago where everybody is locked in at 3% or less? Well, we call them the golden handcuffs. And unless they are really in a position where they're almost forced to move, right? We call the big Ds, death, divorce, diapers, right? Those really make people change their lives and possibly move and sell their home and relocate. Job relocations obviously is another big reason. But death, divorce, and diapers, that's kind of the term we use. And unless one of those big things happen, people are stuck. People are going to be stuck in those interest rates with those golden handcuffs, and therefore inventory is not going to rise. People aren't moving just because they want to have fun and maybe upgrade the house. They're moving because they need to. So if we take a look at that graph again, we only have 2.6 months of inventory here in the Gig Harbor area. I think that's pretty much going to stay pretty flat. We're not going to change much from that really at all. The next thing that we're going to touch on is what I predict prices to do in 2026. And again, when you're on the internet and you're just looking up these websites all over the place, you're going to get information that's all over the board. Redfin says we're going to have a decline in the market. Zillow says we're going to have an increase in the market. Well, which one is right? So again, that's where you really have to consult a local expert to see what's going on in our own little micro area. And here's what I predict for 2026 is if it's an A+ home, if it is put together, if it is presented right, if it is all those things, if it's in the desirable locations such as a waterfront home, a Cannerwood home, those places that are highly desired and the inventory truly is pretty low, what's going to happen? I think they're going to go up about 5% over the course of 2026. Now, if it's a home that needs some work, that they just haven't really put any energy and effort to it, has deferred maintenance, puts up some red flags from the buyers, those homes are going to stay pretty flat. They're not going to really decrease in value, but they're not really going to increase in value. So the A+ homes, the ones that everybody is attracted to, the turnkey ready ones, and the ones that are in those really desirable locations, they're going to rise a little bit, not 20% like they did in 2021, but 5% or so for sure. Buyers out there really need a good playbook for 2026, depending on what they're going after. And you can't rely on these just broad statistics from these websites like I mentioned before, because there's micro markets within the Gig Harbor market, right? Waterfront homes is definitely its own unique market. Neighborhoods such as Cannerwood is definitely its own unique market. So you need to be positioned in those and be ready to go when those things hit the market, because they will not last long, especially if they're an A+ home. That average time on the market currently of 67 days does not apply to those A+ homes, okay? And it doesn't matter if they're $1 million homes on the waterfront Waterfront, or if they're just kind of a normal Gig Harbor home that's maybe priced aggressively to make it sell, like the one that I showed earlier, that is obviously below average price of Gig Harbor. We listed at $650,000 and boom, day one we had an offer, went back on the market, boom, day one we had another offer. Or the second time we were on the market on the first day we had an offer. You know what I mean. So anyway, they move quickly. So if you are a buyer and you are positioning yourself in Gig Harbor to purchase a home or anywhere in the area, you just have to be ready to go. When the right home comes up for you, you got to be ready to pounce on it, because if you wait, you may lose out. So what does this mean? It means that you have to be prepared, be pre-approved, have your financing in order. If you're a cash buyer, great, you don't have to worry about that. But if you are getting traditional financing, have that in place so you can submit an offer with that pre-approval letter, fully underwritten, showing the seller that you are golden, good to go, ready to go, because many sellers will not accept an offer without that pre-approval letter. So if you find a home and then go through the pre-approval process and that takes a day or two, that home may not be available for you anymore whenever you get that pre-approval letter. So be ready to go. Also, don't try to time the market based on interest rates. They're not going to drop that much. And when they do drop, prices will go up a little bit. So you got to realize, yes, you have a slightly lower interest rate, but all of a sudden you're spending $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 more on the house. So you got to weigh each side, and also talk to your lender that you're working with. Lenders have all sorts of programs where they can recast the loan after 6 months and drop it to the rate that it's at then. I mean, there's so many different options where you don't have to necessarily be locked into the rate that you had initially. So if rates do drop significantly, they can adjust them later on to help your budget out. If you're a seller in 2026, well, you got to make sure that you are positioned just right. This is not 2021 where you can just throw your house on the market with cell phone pictures and a subpar listing and get over asking price. That market is done. You need to position yourself correctly. You need to market your home correctly. You need to price it correctly. You do all that, you're going to have a positive outcome for sure. You don't do that and you kind of are lazy about it, or you use a discount brokerage that doesn't do all the things that they should do, you're going to suffer. Just because inventory is higher than it used to be, it's still low. It's still only 2.6%. We're still in a seller's market. I realize all that, but buyers are picky. Buyers are brutal. Okay, that's what I tell all my sellers. Buyers are brutal and they are very particular, especially now because they see average time on the market of 67 days. So they think they have power. They think they can negotiate. Sometimes they can. Sometimes things fly off the shelves. But if you position yourself as a seller in a proper position, you take that power away from the buyers and they come to you with your terms. So if you're a seller, take a look at my seller guide that I'm going to put right here. And there's going to be a link in the description to my seller guide. It shows everything that we do to position your home so you are an A+ listing, so you get that buyer interest. You don't sit on the market for 67 days. You get top dollar in short order. So what is the moral to the story of this whole video? Is Gig Harbor and the surrounding areas, we're our own micro market. We do not necessarily follow the national trends, and our statistics are a little skewed from what you see globally. So really take that for a grain of salt whenever you're just doing internet searches. Consult with our team. We're local experts here. We know the market. We're happy to be a resource for you, show you everything that there is going on in Gig Harbor, and guide you in the right direction. My name is Darren Rivers. I am the Northwest Realtor, and I am managing broker of the Rivers Group. And we help people from all over the country relocate to Gig Harbor. We also help a lot of people in Gig Harbor sell their homes if they're relocating to other areas. So please feel free to reach out. All of our information again is right here, and we'll look at for you on the next video.